Welcome, everyone, back to Cat's Eye on the Future. This week, we have another very special interview with our guest, Lynn, the Psychic Focus Lady. Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Really glad you could make it this evening. Now, we've done one interview with Lynn before, and it was really, really a lot of fun. But just for those that might have missed the first interview, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and how you do it?
Sure. Basically what I do, I'm considered a medium. People will ask me questions regarding all kinds of things, whether it's a world event, it could be personal questions, relationship issues. I do a wide genre of items, and from that I kind of tune in and I focus into what their specific issue is. I tune into their energy, and I tell people what I see. It may come through as an image. It may be something I hear. It may be something I smell, a taste. I might get a physical sensation, which that's what people call an empath. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with that, but basically someone's feelings that they feel within themselves is sort of transferred into you. You tune into their energy and you're experiencing what they're experiencing. It could be an emotion, a pain, something great. It really varies depending on the person. So it's kind of strange the way that it all works and how it comes through, but I do my best to relay what I get without trying to put too much interpretation on it, but because I think a lot gets lost in interpretation. Sometimes what I get is symbolic, which does require a little bit of interpretation, but I always tell people what I see too, because to them it may mean something else. So that's kind of in a nutshell a very brief description of what I do and how things come through to me.
I know you keep the most amazing web blog of this so everybody can read it. Am I correct that you recently had something like a million hits or something on it?
I did. I was so excited. I think it was a couple weeks ago. I was going on my blog and people submit questions to me on my blog. So I was pulling some questions off and I set up rough drafts, and then I kind of go into my drafts and see what I'm feeling for that day and go with that. Well, I was in my blog and I was doing a lot of edits to it, and I noticed that it was almost to 1 million, and I was so excited and humbled at the same time, because never in my wildest imagination would I've ever thought that people would even care what I wrote, much less that much interest. It was just very, it was kind of a surreal moment for me. It was really awesome.
Yeah, I was really, really happy for you, because I saw that at the site. I went, oh, wow, 1 million hits. This is fantastic. Well, I thought tonight, first, on the first half of the show, you might want to give us a little update on some of the highlights from your blog. And I know that you had particularly a couple of stories you wanted to share with people. And I think the first one you had looked at was the Georgia Guidestones, those big stones in Georgia that sort of sit there looking like an ancient monument.
Yes, I did. Someone had submitted a question to me and wanted to pretty much know why they're there. Is it something to be scared of? Is it a warning? I mean, what were the intentions behind it? Who put them there? And that kind of thing. So I tuned into it, and one of the first things that I got, that it wasn't so much to scare people, but it was almost for like this new world, or this new Earth that was eventually going to exist out of necessity, because at the rate that we're going with the financial systems and the way that the Earth is slowly kind of falling apart, people's health. I mean, there's so many issues going on right now, and so many things people are worried about. We can't maintain this current momentum. So what I got was that these stones were placed there, kind of like a kind of, for lack of a better way to explain it, like the 10 Commandments, how that was there to guide people during that time. This is like the commandments of what needs to exist in this new world for things to thrive, for things to work in harmony, and for us to have a balance. And it just goes through, this list of criteria, and it starts with, I think the first thing is the population. Well, that really scared people, because it's significantly less listed on these stones than what we have now. And what I went into was I explained that it's not so much to be feared, but it's sort of realistic. I mean, if we were to grow our own food and we were to get back to our roots of what it used to be, the little house on the prairie days, I got that image of the little house on the prairie. I mean, if we lived during that time, you can't have the population that we have now because you can't grow the food, you can't care for the people. So in a way, it's kind of a common sense approach of how a world that was simplistic and didn't have all the manufacturing, didn't have the processed food, you didn't have the Walmarts on every corner and all of these different things. It's kind of how, a society would need to live in order for everybody to be able to be cared for properly, and you wouldn't have, people starving and the sicknesses and all these types of things. It's just kind of a code to live a new life in a new world after, like a rebirth, so to speak. And then people were curious about, who even put these stones there, because it was anonymous and it had to have cost a ton of money and a ton of effort went into it. These are enormous stones. It's kind of funny because, I talk about the powers that be all the time, whether it's the, Illuminati or whoever it is. It's the powers that be, the people with the money, the people with all the wealth, making the decisions, and they have power because of all of their wealth. Well, I focused in on it, and it was like it was close to them, the person that did this or the group that did this, but it wasn't exactly them. And then I got this image, and it came to me that, how like a teenager will rebel against their parents. It was almost as if a family member of these powers that be kind of took their wealth, and rather than go down the same path as their parents or, other influences in their life, they kind of took an alternative approach, and they thought, how can I use this money for a betterment of society? And they pulled their money together, and it came to me like some rebellious teenager. And I it was a small group, probably 3 or 4 people, chipped in together, formulated this, and came up with this idea. And they invested their money, and they built this huge monument anonymously. They actually were trying to do good with what they had rather than, just waste it frivolously on who knows what, or influence and all of that. So it's like they influenced people. They meant, I feel, good intentions behind it, and they erected this monument down in Georgia. A lot of people ask, well, why? Why do you pick Georgia of all places? And when I tuned in on that, it was kind of peculiar. It was as if that location it felt safe somehow. I mean, I talk a lot about earth changes and the water rising and all these different events that I feel are going to happen. And that sort of coincides with this, because when I focused in on that particular location for this monument to be erected, I got that if the water rose, it was still in a safe place. It was like it still felt healthy. It felt like it would thrive. Even in the worst of times, it felt as though that was a place to be. And somehow these people that built this must have felt the same way, because that was the connection I got, was this was built, it was built to last. It's not meant necessarily even for this current generation. It's not a warning for, people tomorrow to think, oh my, we're going to cut down the population, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's meant to be there for many years to come. And I feel it's almost a thing to say, here's where we went wrong. Future civilization, if you go by these rules, you'll have that much better of a chance. But these are some things where I see, society kind of steered away from it, and part of that is going to be eventually what kind of takes us down. So, very interesting read. It was pretty cool when I was done. I got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of interest, even more so than when I thought I would. But I will say it was I was surprised at how much I got and how much interaction I got from doing this reading.
I'm just curious, did you get the feeling while you were reading that these people were actually having some sort of, I take guidance from somewhere, like, maybe metaphysical or something, or was this just their ideas that they wanted to put forth, that they thought it would make a better world if people did this?
I don't know that it was a metaphysical message that they got, but it was definitely like a higher intellect. I don't know that they necessarily meditated and felt like they got a sign from above or that they had a dream or that they had anything like that, but definitely they are free-thinking people. I feel that they're spiritual people, and I feel as though they are more the leaders and not a follower. They're very independent in their thought and very sure of who they are. So I don't necessarily see it as a psychic metaphysical sense, but definitely a more heightened sense than the average person. A lot of people, well, not a lot of people, because I think in general we're all waking up, but there's some people out there that you tell them something and they believe it. I get that these individuals that built this don't necessarily operate that way. They are a little outside the box.
One thing we didn't talk about this before, but you mentioned it. Can you go in a little bit into what you've seen in terms of water rising and things? I find that really interesting. We can maybe do more of that in another show, but if you could touch on it tonight, I'd be really interested.
Oh, sure. What I saw was that eventually we're going to have issues with like our Earth wobble. Our Earth is not going to have what we consider north and south now. I see it altering, and it doesn't look to alter a huge amount in my mind when I envision it. It's like a slight change in where the North Pole is going to be and where the South Pole is going to be. But what happens when that occurs and that movement takes over, the middle of the Earth, where the equator is, it's the fattest part of our Earth. And I get that when we shift at the fattest part of our Earth, because of the centripetal force and the water being slung in the direction that it is, it's going to be shifted. And when the water shifts due to the North and South Pole altering and the axis being a little off from where it is now, I see water rising in a lot of areas and land emerging in a lot of areas. But what's strange is every time I see it, I always see it in an east and west pattern. I never see it in a north and south. When the water rises, I see like the east coast and the west coast of the United States. It affects the Mississippi River a lot. I see that widening. And I also see the borders in the states shrinking in. I see parts of Europe having some issues, but again, it's more the central part of Earth rather than the North and South Pole. And it's east to west. It's like I see it being right in kind of like the belly or the belt of Earth.
Does this show any effects that you noticed on the poles, on the glaciation of the poles themselves, the ice there?
Yes, because when you do that and you shift the Earth, the ice actually kind of grows, because what is now water, as it shifts to the north, is going to turn into ice. So you might have some mild melting where the old North Pole used to be, but you're going to have a lot of growth of ice too. In a way, it kind of balances out, but overall, I see some growth in the North and South Pole.
Did you see anything that might indicate either afterwards, either a warmer period or perhaps a colder period or even an ice age?
I see that it's not necessarily going to be an ice age or something like that, but we're going to have an altered climate where, for example, parts of Canada that are snow covered, I see as things change in parts of Canada maybe are shifted south, that is going to warm up, and vice versa, places that were warmer are going to be cold and may become snow covered. But again, it's all in a balance. Places, as some places heat up, other places are going to freeze. It's just, the Earth does try to maintain balance, and I see it balancing out that way. It's the same types of climate, just in different locations.
I know this is the hardest thing for most psychics to get, but you get any sense of time on this?
I have focused on this a lot in trying to get a clear picture of when this is going to happen, and I honestly feel like parts of this are happening now. I never see this as a sudden change that within one calendar year we go from what we have now to this new picture of what I think Earth is going to look like. It is a gradual and constant but slow process, and I think that it's happening now. I just feel like it's happening now, and every time I think about it, I feel like I don't get an exact time because it is so slow and continuous. But our weather is changing now. I mean, I even see it, not even from a psychic sense, but I experience it and I live in it, and it's almost like a confirmation of what I already know.
Of that, yeah, I actually, to me, that's somewhat of what I've picked up as well. Not as thoroughly as you or any particular thing like exactly like the potential pole shift, but the idea of the gradual changing, that there may at some point be kind of a flip, but it's sort of like it's an ongoing process. But I think that would make a really great probably topic for another show. I mean, we've done a lot right now, but I thank you for doing that kind of off the cuff, because I think that's really interesting, and maybe we'll do like a longer piece on it later if you'd like. But meanwhile, I think the other thing you wanted to talk about was you did some looking at Bigfoot or Sasquatch.
Yes, I did. Someone had asked me to do a reading on like the Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatches, all of that type of a creature. And so when I did it, I thought, oh, this will be a fun, quick reading. But then when I got into it, I was completely fascinated by it. When I very first connected, what I saw was, and you kind of have to imagine this as I describe it, I saw this Bigfoot, and he was walking, and as he was walking, he was leaving footprints in the mud. So I'm seeing this Bigfoot and this, big hairy animal walking through the forest, leaving these footprints, and then the Bigfoot disappeared, but the footprints still remained, as if the footprints were existing, but I couldn't see the Bigfoot. So that was how my reading very first started out, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I focused in on that to figure out what that meant. And what I figured out was that Bigfoot is actually a very highly intelligent, kind of a spiritual being. He's able to elevate his vibration so you can see through him, but he's still there. It's not like he disappears and he goes to another place. It's not like a teleportation or anything like that. He's actually there, but he's smart enough to not get caught. And as I was, focused in on him, and I felt as though I was like I can't think of the word I'm trying to use, telepathically talking to him. It was as if he's lonely and he's sad. These Bigfoots are. They really want to interact with humans, but they're scared of us. And so I was trying to dig into that a little more and find out, why? Why are you scared? What do you think will happen? And it kind of came to me that, they think that humans are very unpredictable. They don't want to end up in a zoo. They don't want to end up our pet and captured or killed for money. And it was as if when he was talking to me, it dawned on me that he was right. We would probably do that. There are, so many people out there just wanting the fame or the glory or, being the first one to capture one, that I can imagine something like that would happen. But occasionally they will present themselves to a person, but it's almost that they can read your energy. They can sense your intention, and if you have a good intention, they occasionally will approach a human, and they have, it's like you can look at them and like mentally know what they're thinking, and they do the same for you. You can't understand their speech. They make, it's these weird tones, like these yelling and these sounds. But what I got was to each other, when a Bigfoot is talking to another Bigfoot, same species, it doesn't sound like that. It's completely coherent. But when we hear it, because of the tones that our ears are able to pick up, it sounds like this horrible yelling, screaming, horrific sound, terrifying sound. But in reality, it's not. Our ears just don't have the spectrum of sounds that they make. So the way that they can talk to humans is in a telepathic sense, where you know what they think and they know what you think. And when I went into this reading, you part of doing a reading is you have to shut down your rational mind, but two, your biases. You can't judge what comes into you. I will say, though, when I first read it, I thought, oh, my preconceived notion was, oh, they're scary, they're this. I would never want to run into one. But letting all of that go and going into this, I actually felt sorry for him. I mean, there was a part of me that it kind of broke my heart when, they were talking about how lonely they are, and they're like craving to be able to interact with humans and be treated sort of as one, because they are very intelligent. But I think that he's right that we would try to capture and do something to them. I understand why they don't trust us, and I think it's a shame that they don't, because there's so much there. I feel we could learn even spiritual lessons from them. It was a very surprising, very cool reading.
I'm curious, did you get a feeling from him of sort of a distant kinship with mankind, or did he feel like something totally separate?
It did feel separate, and I would almost say that they are more related to maybe alien life than have a human connection, because of every time I think about ETs and I think about alien life and I go there with a reading, there is this high intellect. The one thing that some ETs lack is the ability to express emotion, understand emotion, feelings, that type of thing. Some of them are very compassionate. Others are void of emotion, and they just run on, what they do, and they feel like a robot. But when I tuned into him, the amount of intellect and the ability to communicate telepathically and just all of that, I felt that connection with him was more like a connection I've had with an ET doing a reading versus a human.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because way back in the 1970s, one of my physical anthropology professors pointed out that there had actually been a creature that had walked on Earth until really fairly recently, geologically, that we knew about, who was in fact about 7 feet tall to 8 feet tall and was a primate, and we call this Gigantopithecus. And he had always wondered if Bigfoots were simply Gigantopithecus, which that's why I wondered if perhaps it felt like a cousin, but maybe it's not. It may not be related at all. It was just curious.
No, I did not get that. Now, I do get that giants did one time walk the earth, but I don't get a relationship to Bigfoot necessarily.
Can you tell us just a little bit about the giants? Again, that might be, we can go into that more in another time, but that's kind of interesting.
Yes. One time someone asked me about giants, and I tuned in to that. Just to see what I got. I always try to keep an open mind regardless of what my thoughts are, because it's really quite amazing some of the things that come to you when you open yourself up to it. So I focused in on the whole aspect of giants, and I got that they very much did roam the earth. I get that they were descendants of like an alien/human offspring. And I also get that at the time that they existed, the Earth was actually smaller, so the gravitational force wasn't as hard as what it is now. It wasn't as intense, which allowed things to grow bigger because blood could pump, people could grow, you didn't have the weight carried on you, and it allowed for just a bigger type being to exist. While as the Earth's gravity changed and people evolved, they sort of died out just because they couldn't exist. Your heart can't pump blood with, to that huge of a beast when, the gravity is pulling down. It's too hard on your systems. People, through evolution, sort of die out. So, yeah, I do get at one time they were here, but it was a different type being.
Yeah, they're not related. Well, again, that's really, really interesting, and I think that might be fun to go into a little more detail another show. Well, that was a really, really interesting blog update, and I think at this point, though, what we want to do, we have a real surprise for our listeners in the second half of the show. I think we're going to take a bit of a break, but you'll want to stay tuned because we decided to do an experiment between the two of us, Lynn and I, and we'll be talking about that a bit more just in a few moments. See you back very soon.
You have been listening to part 1 of Cat's Eye on the Future. We'll return to the show right after these short messages.
Do you have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
We now return to part 2 of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Welcome back from the break, and now I'm going to tell you all a little bit about the experiment that Lynn and I decided to do, and then we'll get right into it. We thought it might be fun because we both tend to look at current events and things, among other things, questions that people ask us, and try to see if we can see or perceive things, and then we make interpretations or educated guesses sometimes about what that might mean or how things might be going. And she does it from a viewpoint of being a trance medium, and I generally do it more from reading cards and runes. So they're kind of looking at the same kinds of things but different systems. Now, we did this ahead of time. What we did was we picked a couple of questions that we hadn't looked at a lot, at least not recently. And we deliberately didn't look into what each other had done, even if we had done some stuff at first. We went and we each did a separate reading on these two topics, and then we read over each other's readings, and then we chatted about them. And what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Lynn, and she's going to talk about the first reading that she did, and then I'll kind of talk about what I got from it, and then we'll chat for a minute or a few minutes on that. And then we'll do the second reading, and we'll do the same thing. She'll tell you what she got, I'll tell you what I got, and we'll compare notes. And it'll be kind of interesting to see what might have been the same, what might have been different, and just so people can see the different ways that these things work. So the first topic we decided to look at the Ukraine and the situation in the Ukraine and Russia. And in both cases, we're sort of looking to the end of 2014 or a little bit beyond if we saw something. So Lynn, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about first what you got.
Okay, great. When I first tuned into this, what I saw is, at first China kind of popped up in my mind, and I got that China is actually the driving force that is keeping all of this going, and they're using Russia as a way to instigate things. They're using Russia as their kind of tool toward the United States. So China's sort of coming at us, but not directly. So they're using Russia to instigate things and draw in the U.S. into kind of a battle that we don't want to be in. The U.S. is primarily focused on the oil-producing countries because that's what they need. That's where the money is. That's the resource that we need to use. We don't want to be fighting issues somewhere else, but we're kind of being pulled into this. We have in the United States this reputation of having the superior military and being a superpower. So to see a country being invaded, even though we may not want to go there, we still get pulled in because we have a reputation to uphold. Allowing Russia to invade the Ukraine shows weakness, and we can't afford to have that happen. We want to maintain our power. We want to maintain our control. The U.S. involvement, it's kind of ego-based, and I don't see a positive intention behind it as to why the U.S. is there. I think they're there because they feel that they have to be and that the world expects them to be there. And Russia, by force of the Chinese influence, with their power and money, is going to continue to pick and slowly take over parts of the Ukraine until other countries really step in. I get that the threats or agreements aren't going to stop this. The Chinese want the U.S. weak, ultimately, and Russia's the tool to do it. Russia doesn't care about sanctions or rules because they have the Chinese providing what the other countries don't. So when the U.S. goes to China, or goes to Russia, rather, and says, you can't do this or we're going to do this, in a way I feel like they laugh about that because ultimately they have China at their back door saying, okay, that's fine. They're not going to do this. Well, we're going to step in and do it for you. Time-wise, when I focused in on this, I got that by the end of 2014 or early 2015, things kind of get a little more active. I kind of get too that it's not a coincidence. This is a time frame when the U.S. dollar is really going to take a hit, because we're going to be so vulnerable in the U.S. and so weak if and when the dollar collapses. And according to my timeline, it really corresponded with this 2014 date and 2015 date. And I see the strategy. It's kind of something that's been planned, and it's slowly unfolding, and everything is just sort of aligning the right way of what China wanted and what Russia's trying to do. I get the U.S. is going to find themselves deep in a conflict, not an all-out war, but there's definitely going to be some conflict. And the U.S. can't afford to do that. They're going to end up borrowing more money and creating sort of the perfect situation for China to step up and shine as a top contender for world power. I get China really wants to be on top. They're tired of being second or third or whatnot. They're smart. They have a military. They produce things. They produce things that everybody wants. They have gold, and they want to be viewed that. They want the credit for all the work that they're putting in, and they're just kind of letting other people self-destruct so they can step up. And this is the way to sort of further that along, and that's kind of how I see the situation panning out.
Okay. Now, what I did is I asked a question. Those of you who've been listening to the show for a long time knew that when I first started the show, I primarily was just doing these kind of card readings, and I kind of went back to that format. And I asked a very specific question because particularly with card readings, you tend to get a better answer up to a point the more specific you are. So my question was, what are the most likely energies or events the cards want to flag concerning the ongoing situation between Russia and the Ukraine between now, just in mid-June 2014, and at the end of December 2014? Now, notice I only asked about those two countries, so that may have been kind of what framed my reading a little bit differently from Lynn's. But it's interesting what I got. The cards I got very quickly were the wheel, and that's like the wheel of fortune or the wheel of fate, cycles and changes. So that's the primary card, and this tells us that that a lot of what's going on is really fated, and you probably can't do a lot to change it. It means that things have already started, and they're probably just going to have to play themselves out. And at this point, there's probably not a whole lot that individuals can do to stop them. I mean, people can make individual changes because, like, this is a human-caused event as opposed to, like, a natural disaster or something. But it's largely, the wheel has now turned. Things are happening. The Inquirer card came next, and that's often the person asking the question, or in this case, our audience. And I think that it's basically saying that, again, we're just kind of watching and seeing what happens. Now, the next card was the work card. And the work card is usually about mundane work or a job or something. Can be spiritual as mental work as well. And I think that what this is suggesting here is that it's kind of the working of the cycle. Again, it's just this situation of it's working the way it's going to work, and there's not a whole lot that anybody can do about it. The next card I got was birth, which again, I think it plays into this is a new situation starting now. This is a new cycle. And it's also next to the sun card. And I really felt those two cards went together. We have the birth of the sun. And because the sun card is followed by the destruction card, it was almost could be the birth of the sun or the birth of destruction. And this image really, among all of them, really, really concerned me. Part of what concerned me was the fact that, this kind of sense with the wheel turning and like the horses have kind of bolted down the road and all we could kind of do is follow them. But the other thing that really concerned me was this kind of solar destruction energy, because anytime you have the sun involved with something, you also have to think about both the sun as in terms of weather, the sun is in terms of strength, but also the sun is sort of like all things nuclear as well. It's like the little sun. And when you also And remember that the Ukraine is where Chernobyl is still there, and that the sun also was like associated with electricity and fire and heating and things like that. It just struck me that there was the birth of a new situation, particularly a potential perhaps use of nuclear weapons or nuclear energy in some form or also, or perhaps even just this destruction of the power grid, the infrastructure, the electricity, essentially the dying of the fire. And it really, really concerned me. Also, I think the sun is a time marker. It suggests that a lot of this action is going on into summer, and which it is. And the final card I got, I did get a couple of runes as well, but the final card I got was, again, destruction, which I kind of already mentioned. But basically, and I think the summer is the time when we really see this wholesale destruction of things. Now, for the runes, I got the horse rune, which is also a rune of unequal partnership. So again, that image of the wagon being held together. But we also have ice, Isa, frozen. Things are hard. Things are likely to be stuck. Or we get the image of a frozen partnership between people, tribes, and nations. So basically, nothing is really going to happen in the short term. And I really got the feeling, again, it's a time marker, because when we have the summer with the destruction period, I also got an image of cold, freezing, bitter, unmoving winter. For fall and winter, that seems to be the theme. Perhaps, again, this is due to a cutoff of oil and gas, but also other reasons. I get, again, this sense of maybe a weather problem causing by either a lack of sunlight, possibly man-made or possibly natural, but also just the political climate. You know, it just all feels really stuck and frozen and unmoving, like no one's willing to give anything. It's unlikely, based on this reading, that efforts to create a long-term ceasefire at the end, the hostilities are going to occur right now or anytime real soon. I think people will try, but I think there is a potential down the road for things to just kind of like freeze and stick for a while. And I think right now the attempts to make them better are just likely to make them worse, that uneven. The two horses trying to move together, but they're not really yoked very well. So I think things just kind of stay cold and dangerous for a while. I did pull one more card. Sometimes you can do that because I wanted to see, like, well, was I kind of on the right track here? And the card I pulled was the prison. This is the card with a person sitting in jail in manacles, and they can't even see out the window. And this just struck me as being perfectly this trapped, unmoving, unyielding energy that I'm getting, combined with the sun of destruction. Again, I just don't expect to see a solution anytime soon. Now, my gut feeling is that outright skirmishes, violence, and battles are likely to continue for the summer, like I said, and then that stalemate. Okay, that's mostly what I got at this point. And then we kind of compared notes. Now, the major thing I noticed on our note comparison was that I didn't get anything with China, but then I didn't phrase the question that way, so I wasn't looking. And I noticed you had a few comments as well when we looked at things together.
Oh, sure. And what I did, when I did my reading, I didn't look at anything that you had sent me. And then when I was all the way done and I already had it emailed out, I kind of looked and I did make some notes of some things and how I interpreted it, or how I viewed it. And the one thing, the Wheel of Fate, I view Earth kind of like a living thing as well. A lot of times when I visualize Earth, I'll see this movement, like how when you see a person's chest rise up and down. I get that image a lot when I'm looking at Earth. So I feel like it's a living thing, and it has a fate or a destiny too. So when you got the Wheel of Fate, I kind of saw it as this is Earth's destiny for a changeover to happen. You know, the U.S. has been on top for a while, and I feel like there's this change on the horizon, and that's what it's going to be. There's a lot of changes going on. And then when, you know, you went further into your reading and you had the birth card, I was like, wow. Because to me, the way I see it, you know, with everything you have, and you had death too, but to have a birth and have a change, a lot of times that requires the death of something for something new to blossom from it. And I feel it's going to be a newer world. We're going to have a change of power. We're going to have a restructuring of how things are done, a new way of looking at things energetically. People are waking up, becoming more spiritual, thinking for themselves, wanting more. You're going to have just the physical stuff of what's happening, of countries shifting and power changing, maybe monetary systems changing. So when you had the death and the birth, I saw that as this changeover with Earth. So it feels to me even so much bigger than just the China or the Ukraine and in Russia event going on. I see all these other factors piling in, and it's so much bigger. This is just a small piece of what the big picture is. And so I wasn't surprised, but it was kind of this wow thing, because when I saw all of the things that you had and how you put it together, it made so much sense. And I do get there's going to be some weather manipulation when we start, when the U.S. starts to interfere with this situation with Russia and the Ukraine, because the weather wars, that's the cheaper route to go. You're not flying people over there. You're not the bombs and all the stuff. That's all these costly items. I mean, the weather is just a matter of a radar or however they do it. But it seems to me, when I view it, much more of an efficient and precise way of handling things. So I do get there's going to be some weather manipulation. It may cause some darkness. There may be storms. I definitely see that going on. Plus, when you do that, you weaken the people that are there. You create a situation where they're already have a strike against them, and then you can go in, and it even makes that battle so much easier. So I do see some issues with that going on.
Did you get the just to get there in for a second? Do you get the feeling that this is deliberate weather manipulation, or is this the side effect of something else that happens? I couldn't really tell.
I did not get that it would be nuclear. I see it more as an intentional act, like using the weather as a weapon.
Okay.
That's how I saw it. It could happen that way. I just didn't get that.
I couldn't tell. I just felt very strongly that something was wrong with the weather. And that it, might affect the situation dramatically. And I actually had almost an image of like the Winter War, that you see in documentaries on World War II, where everything in Russia just freezes.
Mm-hmm.
You have the lines there. And again, with that ISA image, these are symbolic as well as physical, but there also seemed to be like almost the physical world was mirroring what was going on in the political world, but everything was frozen.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. If something nuclear does happen, I don't see it as an intentional act, but I feel as though the weather portion and the weather manipulation, that is intentional.
Right.
But I didn't get so much of the nuclear. Overall, in readings that I do, I don't get that any country really wants to involve nuclear warfare. It's more of a threat, and it's more of a way to defend themselves, like, hey, you have this, well, I have this too. It's more of an intimidation factor, but I don't get that anybody really wants to do that, because it creates worldwide issues. I mean, I get that the United States, it would be such a rare chance to have a nuclear issue intentionally happen, because our land is so valuable for food here that they don't want to taint the land, because the land is valuable. So really anywhere in the world, because of the way the wind and the water and all of that, I don't see any intentional nuclear things happening. If it does happen, it's going to be an accident.
Yeah, that was kind of why I focused a little on Chernobyl, or maybe if it's not Chernobyl, something like that. I don't know if there's like other nuclear plants still in that area or not. I don't know if that was the only one there or something, but it didn't feel necessarily like someone was going to drop a bomb. It just felt like there might be or it could have been, electricity, it was just hard to tell, but it definitely felt like something. But like I said, I didn't feel a bomb being dropped either, really. I would be very surprised. Mm-hmm. I think that the Russians in particular have a pretty good idea of how much damage that would do. And, no one wants to destroy the Ukraine breadbasket any more than they want to destroy the North American one. I don't get that feeling. Yeah. Well, that was really interesting. Was there anything else you got on that?
No, not really. I will say our time frames, mine was more winter and going into early 2015. I think you had it pegged more for this summer, didn't you? Did I understand that right?
Okay, what I was seeing was two different things. I got the feeling that this summer was more likely when most of the actual, like, hands-on violence was likely to keep happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then I got more the feeling that going into fall and winter, again, I just had this image of the freezing. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that could just be the weather, but I also thought that it might be kind of freezing into a stalemate.
Mm.
And,
Yep.
you know, that part of the world, traditionally not a lot happens in winter in war, you know, except a lot of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, I could be wrong because, again, you read further. You're doing mediumistic things, so you're not having to. Your times are probably more fluid. The cards also tend to be a little bit fluid, but I asked specifically. I only did it to December 2014, which technically means if something's happened like the second week of January, I might not pick it up, depending, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think were you seeing more violence in the winter then, or?
Yes, I did. I felt like it was
Okay.
more in the winter when they're vulnerable.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't feel that the U.S. would be so much there on foot. It would be more aerial tactics. But I felt like the wintertime is where, you know, which in a way would make sense. You're cold, you're out there freezing, and then someone can come in and you're more vulnerable. I just get that they're made more vulnerable by their weather and the weather conditions, and those conditions are going to be intensified by man-made means. And once they're very down, that's when the attack will happen.
Okay, well, this is the kind of thing where, you know, we just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I also want to point out that I wasn't looking either. I didn't see the U.S. connection, but then I asked about the Ukraine and Russia. So, you know, again, you asked a much more deeper sort of overall everything, and it may very well be that I tend to agree that if the U.S. did get involved, it probably would be airstrikes or something. I can't really see. I'd be really surprised with boots on the ground, at least this year. I don't, you know, it was something really drastic would have to happen, but we'll just see. So that's one thing where you have it kind of one way and I sort of thought was the other, but I know with me, I'm just kind of getting impressions from the cards on that. I wasn't absolutely sure. So we'll just mark that down and maybe revisit it like early next year and we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And it'd be really great if none of the violence occurred. I'm sure we'd both be really delighted, but somehow I don't think that's going to happen, sadly. Okay, so we did a second one, and we did that on the Yellowstone volcano. And again, we were sort of looking at a somewhat short time frame, but I'll let you go ahead and do your impressions first, and then I'll share mine, and then we'll do the same thing and share what we kind of discussed about it.
Okay. When I first tuned in on Yellowstone, what I get is this area is a lot more active than what the experts are saying. I get there's kind of a lot of behind-the-scenes panic going on, but they don't let that be known. They just are keeping that to themselves to avoid chaos, partly because they don't know what to do with the people. I mean, you cause hysteria and you cause all these issues. If you don't have a solution, it's really hard to present people with the truth, even though I think people would like to know the truth. So I get that they're kind of hiding what's really going on. I see an image of them monitoring this area from space through satellites, and there's a lot going on. And they're using some kind of a heat and a sound and a vibration, temperature sensors. There's a lot of different, very high-tech mechanisms hooked up to determine what the activity is and if the Earth's moving or tremors, all of those type of things. And they have a pretty good picture, but again, they don't want to create this fear, panic, chaos until they have to. I see a desperate attempt to try to relocate people or have the option of some type of a camp for people to go to when the time comes. And I feel these places are going to be on the opposite side of the country and very remote. Like they didn't want to intermingle people from the location around Yellowstone with towns. It's like they want to keep those people separate in some type of a separate situation. And it didn't really come through to me clearly as to why that would be, why you would want those people in two different spots. But I get that there's something in the works or some type of a building or housing or facility being erected to handle this. Almost like they know it's a for sure thing and this is going to have to happen. And they're working on a fix for it and just not really telling people. I get that the animals already know something isn't right. There's something subconscious within the animals like this primal instinct, and they can't hide from it. It's almost undeniable, and the animals just, they sense it. There's sounds or vibrations, frequencies going on right now in the earth, and they can hear it, and they feel it. And I get that it builds up, and they can hear these sounds, like how a human can hear a ringing in their ears. These animals are hearing it too, and it's really painful. I get that they act erratic. They run around in weird directions, or they'll form herds and just try to run away from this thing that's causing this pain in their ears. And then I got that it even affects animals clear down to, you know, insects and bees. Almost like magnetic north doesn't work right, and just everything is out of whack when you go around this area, and these animals are just doing anything they can really to escape where they're at. Then I was trying to focus on a timeline, because, you know, that's what everybody wants to know, is when is this going to happen? And I didn't get it was going to happen until near the end of 2016, when we see some activity, like really see it with our eyes, televised, hear about it, not just measurements, but visually something is going to go on. I don't see it happening as an extinction event, like a huge explosion in this volcano erupting all at once. I see it pop in small bursts, and it travels along a straight line. It's like it does a pop, and then it, you know, maybe 12 months later, there's another pop, and it's all on this exact same line. It's really strange when I see it, because if you took a ruler and drew a line, and every 2 inches you put an X, it would be like, that's a pop, that's a pop. It just keeps going in order, in succession. And overall, I saw that Yellowstone relieves its pressure slowly. It's steady and consistent until it goes back to that normal pressure, and then that next pop happens. And that was really all I got for Yellowstone. But it was cool, and it was actually, I felt somewhat at ease, thinking we're not going to have this gigantic extinction. Sorry, I get tongue-tied. Extinction event going on. It was more of a slow, steady, constant eruption that encompasses a much smaller circumference of area at a time.
Okay, well, what I got, again, I focused more on one question, and what I did was I said, what are the most likely energies concerning the Yellowstone National Park volcanic area for the rest of 2014 until December 2014, the end of it? And the cards I got, I'm going to read the cards off first very quickly, and then I'm going to review them, because this one's a little bit different. The first card I got was the Sage, which would be wisdom, study, and recording of the future. And I really thought that went very well with your they know more than they're saying, that same kind of thing, that I felt that they were, you know, somebody studying us. The Scales card is a judgment or decision. And it's usually not a decision that the person asking the question can make. In other words, it's something out of our hands. It's out of human hands. We've got the Castle Tower, which is a strong, defensible place with strong walls, a fortress on a hill or a protected place, which again, kind of interestingly enough, compares with your reading. The Death card, it can be the death of a person, but it's also like a final ending for something or someone. And it's not usually physical death, but it can be. Once again, we have the Wheel of Fate, Karma, and Cycles. But whereas the Wisdom and Study is the primary card, this is the tone of the first of this reading, the Wheel was the first card in the other reading. It's like sort of the finishing card in this one. So we have the frame of study your fate, in other words. And then the runes we have are Berkano, which is just like the birth card. It's the birch tree, it's the birth, it's Mother Goddess, but it's also seen sometimes as the breasts or two mountains. So it's the two mountains of the mother. And then Uruj rune, which is ancient cattle, healing, strength, ice age, prehistory. Very, very sort of primordial runes there. Okay, now what do I think this means? We've got all these nice symbols. I think the Sage card suggests that, again, the continuous study and recording of this area is a very wise choice on the part of modern people. And I think it is going on. Well, mankind could not in any way affect the way the scales of fate are likely to fall concerning the next eruption. And they can't affect the geological activity either. But being wise, they may know when it's time to seek shelter and safety from the danger and death that this may pose. Now, I remember Lynn and I had no contact when we made these read, and yet you can see the parallels showing up there. I'm seeing it more, it's just the fact that safety needs to be found, and when she's actually seeing maybe the places that they may be planning for people to go. The death card gives me images not so much of volcanic eruption before the end of this year, but a suggestion that there may be some other deaths in this part of the reading. In other words, they may be related to gases or some other geological activity in the park, like geysers or something. And I think this may be more the death of animals. There might be like an accident or something with some people that are just in the wrong place or something. And I really sense a continuing die-off of trees and plants, which I think has already been happening and marked in the park. But I also get this uneasy feeling that the park should no longer really be considered a safe place like it once was. I mean, perhaps at some places in the park that have been considered safe are just not going to be any longer, and they may be closed to the public. Look for that before the end of 2014. And also, like I said, there might be a death or accident of some sort that can like sort of flag this to people that maybe things aren't what they used to be. Now, again, the Wheel of Changes, the Wheel of Fate, and Karma, it works with that Scales card, suggests the cycle of the area is on the move. Things are moving and changing. And the wheel may be about to turn, but again, I don't think before the end of the year. The Berkano birth rune suggests that things are starting to come into being that may indicate this geological era is coming to life or being born. And I also almost got the sense of possibly even a new mountain or perhaps a new volcanic vent is being born. I've got that in quotes, kind of. I mean, I get this strong coming into being energy off this rune, and this rune tends to be more epic in energy than cards anyway, because the runes are an older system, but they can be less clear on time. Then cards can be a little easier to try to figure time on. But anyway, I keep seeing the Berkano rune sideways and thinking of the two mountains or twin peaks. And while I know that Yellowstone is a caldera volcano, which means it's like an upside down mountain, I also wonder if the underground system there is likely to affect some previously inactive or unrecognized volcanoes nearby, or perhaps that new mounds are coming into being and that uplift will begin to be noticed by the end of the year. In fact, even if I'm wrong on the physical mountain part, and I'm not sure I am, but even if I am, I keep hearing uplift or uplifting as a form of movement, this very sense of just pushing forward to the surface. And the final rune is Uruz, which is the ancient wild cattle. These aren't modern cattle that are like domesticated. These are like the ancient, big, huge cattle you see on cave walls. And the rune's associated with very strong and powerful energy. Sometimes it's healing. Sometimes it's like stampeding and raging. But it's always ancient, and it has associations with the Ice Age. The Norse story, the mythos, is the great cow of Dumla gave birth to the modern age of man when she licked the ice off the ancient ice sheets and melted them to form the modern world, which again is just absolutely epic and really fits with something like Yellowstone. The thing about wild cattle is that they're really strong when they're standing in one place, but they're pretty much unstoppable if they decide to stampede. There are few natural forces that can stop them until the herd either stops on its own or just rushes over a cliff. I mean, you just can't stop them once they decide to go off. There's no human energy short of, you can divert them maybe, but you can't stop them. So what we're looking at is wild, strong energy, sometimes associated with ice and flooding. I also kept seeing in my mind the buffalo from the park as some kind of marker here. They'd be the nearest modern equivalent to the ancient cattle. And whereas I don't think they're directly involved in the changing landscape, I'm not sure if they're just a symbol of the area in general or they're really something happening, but they feel really important in some way. And I think they should be watched for changes before the end of 2014. I'll be really surprised if we don't see something. The Uruz rune also makes me think of ice, winter, and the Ice Age. Again, the winter is a time marker for when geological activity may happen this year, if any does. Again, if there's anything serious, it's more likely to be in the winter or something that can't be ignored than it will be during the summer. I think we're looking later in the year. I think there will be some signs in the summer, perhaps, again, maybe some deaths from gases or obvious uplifting in the ground that gets hit by, that they can tell with instruments. Changes for even minor earthquakes, things like that in the summer. But the time of snow and fallen ice is when things seem to be more obvious. Now, again, I'm picking this up in both readings, so this could be something for me too. All psychics need to pay attention to that. Sometimes we see patterns that we think are in the outer world, and maybe there's something in our own lives. So that's something interesting. I'm seeing that in both places, so I'm just marking that. So even with the death card, I think that while the cycle of changes may be moving towards some sort of geologically active possible eruption of some sort at Yellowstone, I'd be surprised if it actually took place again before the end of 2014. On the other hand, I think definitely we're going to see signs of the area waking up further, possibly enough to give birth to the conditions that are making an eruption possible, and maybe come to the point where, at least in terms of the scientific community, there's not long going to be a question of if but when. There's also this feeling like a finger on the back of a chalkboard that I have to mention about other volcanoes or other geographical areas that may be affected by what's going on below ground. I keep seeing like a map from a documentary showing how Yellowstone really reaches all the way to the west coast of the United States, and it may all be interconnected. And I'm not sure about the timeline on this, but it feels to me like Yellowstone isn't isolated, and there may actually be some other volcanoes that erupt first elsewhere. I got particularly feelings places like maybe Lassen, Shasta, Mount St. Helens, that whole northwest coast area, which again, I'm not sure is officially connected, but feels connected in some way. And I think that may be actually the first eruption or the first signs of eruptions before Yellowstone erupts. And that's kind of what I had. And at this point, I have a Mercury in retrograde thing because my notes I took on both of us together are gone. Did you have any of the discussions that we did on your end, Lynn?
I did, and we did have a lot of similarities. I was actually amazed by that. I mean, you got the monitoring that they're doing and that they need to do. I, too, feel like by the end of the year, there's definitely going to be some safety issues and signs, and what you said about Yellowstone, the places that are considered safe and family-oriented and everybody goes and visits and hikes, I too get that that's not going to be the case, and that it's going to have this eerie feeling. You're almost going to feel like you're walking into danger when you go there. Your death card, I also agree with that. I see it in terms of animals and wildlife, and I had even written down, you know how you'll see these mass things of fish or birds, or you'll just see animals randomly die for no reason and find them. I feel like that type of a scenario is going to start happening, and that a lot corresponds with the death card of what you saw. I don't necessarily see it in terms of human life. There may be an accident here or there, but wildlife and animals and vegetation, that type of thing is definitely being impacted by that. I really liked what you said about the new vent and the new volcanoes. I saw them pop in a line, which in a way corresponds with that because I didn't see one big eruption. It looked to me that it happened in a series, and it did extend over a couple states. I got it more toward the direction of California area. I didn't see so much the northwest part of the United States, but kind of going from California, as if this volcano underground is absolutely enormous, and it expands over not just where it is, but several states are included in this.
Well, Shasta was one of the possibilities I got, and that's in California, so.
Oh, well, okay, I was thinking that was closer up to Washington.
That's Lassen.
Okay, I got them mixed up in my mind, but.
No, that's okay. I only remembered because, see, at the beginning of this year, I was sitting below Shasta, but I couldn't see it. And I was sitting with my native elder friend, and I pointed and I said, that way, that's where the ash is going to come from. Mm-hmm. And the woman sitting next to me turned white because, and she turned to my native elder friend and said, "You said we'd be safe here." And I said, "Well, I didn't see any lava." And it was in fact the direction of the volcano, but I wasn't going for time. I mean, this could have been 100 years in the future, but I could feel that's why I'm a little more connected to Shasta at the moment, just because I was just there recently.
Oh, I've never been there. I hear it's beautiful.
It really is.
And then the stampedes that you got, I related that to what I saw with these animals going crazy, trying to get away from the sound and pressure and all these noises in their head just stampeding out of there. Maybe it's not connected and it's different, but when you say that, it just rang to me to that same image I had of animals just getting out of Dodge. They have an instinct within them, and they know. They don't need to be told by people. They sense things aren't right, and I got they're going in mass quantities. It just feels eerie there and not safe. It just has a completely different vibe in that area.
Yeah, I get almost the image of putting one's foot down and shuddering. I mean, it's just, now, like probably the rest of the world, I've seen that movie, that docudrama they did on Yellowstone. So, I mean, but again, sometimes our minds, when we're seeing things psychically, they can use images we already have. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of that image of, where the people are walking on the boardwalk and it starts steaming. That's kind of the feeling I get. Maybe it's not actually going to do that quite as visually yet, but that feeling of right under the surface, it's not a place I'd really want to visit. And I also, had the stampeding cattle. I think you're right. I mean, it's probably stampeding buffalo, but that sense of get out of here, get out of here, get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very strong. Well, and again, I noticed too that I was interested that you got the feeling of 2016, because I said I didn't look out that far, but it didn't feel to me like things were going to go this year. Just they were going to start to become pretty obvious.
Yes, I think a lot's going on that we're not being told. I think by 2016 it's going to be visible. I mean, the people that live there, it's going to be on the news. It's undeniable at that point. Right now they can kind of hide it because it's more instrumental in all of their monitoring and all of their electronics that are measuring the activity that's going on. It's not really a public thing. They don't want to create all this hysteria. And I also get that they're trying to formulate some sort of a alternate housing to have somewhere to put these people when things do start to happen. So there's a lot of behind the scenes prep work going on, but by 2016 I think it's going to be a lot more evident.
Yeah, and also, I mean, we both, I think, you more strongly than me, but I also had that same impression that I wasn't really feeling, like the whole, a continent-destroying eruption. At least that's not what I was feeling yet anyway. But they don't have any way of knowing whether it, could destroy 2/3 of the United States, or it's more like what we're seeing, which isn't good, but we're looking at something that's along the lines of a major changing event, but not, like you said, an extinction level one,
Mm-hmm.
Probably not even something that would destroy the country, but it would just make it incredibly difficult for a few years, if handled correctly. Hard to tell, but, again, not an easy thing, but not as bad as, say, it was, whatever, how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, when it, pretty much obliterated a lot of North America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, did you get anything more on that?
I don't think I did. I didn't know if you had anything else to add or not. I've kind of gone through my notes and.
Yeah, and actually at this point, I'm glad you had yours, because like I said, I went and looked, and my follow-up notes are just gone, which is probably, but I think you had both of them anyway. So I think we're pretty much done on that. Again, that'll be an interesting one to revisit maybe in January. Again, if we do another show on this, we can sort of look at what we got and see what's going on with our timing and stuff, and it'd be kind of fun. But I think this has been really enjoyable and really interesting. Before we go, I want you to give out your website and everything so people can find you.
Sure. My website is psychicfocus.blogspot.com. And I'm Lynn.
Yeah, and you can go there and you can see all of. She's just got pages and pages and pages of all this stuff that she shares with us for free. You do readings too, though, don't you?
Yes, I do. I do personal readings and I do phone readings, and I have that information on my blog. And then I do kind of general, worldly events, whether it's today I did a big one on health, or the weather, or just a current event that's happening, like the Bigfoot or Guidestones, just really anything that would be of general interest to a lot of people. I have a page where people can submit those general interest questions, and I go in and I try to do at least 3 or 4 a week. Sometimes I do one every day, but yes, all of that is free, but I do paid personal and phone readings.
And I highly encourage everybody to consider this lady when you want a reading, because I think she's really, really good, and I'm really, really happy that she was with us this evening. I hope you'll come back sometime. We can do this again.
Oh, I'd love to. I think this is so fun, and I really liked the doing the readings and comparing our different techniques. I have never done that before, and I thought that was a really cool spin. So,
yeah, I really enjoyed it too. I really think that, if we could pull it off, we should do this several times a year and, pick topics and that, like I said, we can review each time. And because, way I see it is using different psychic techniques and more than one psychic, not only do you get different perspectives because you're going to get different information, but also everybody that does this kind of work, you bring a little bit of yourself with you. There's always your monkey mind. I mean, me and everybody else, we do this. And if you have 2 or 3 people looking at it, there's more of a chance that you're going to get less of past that and more to the actual information, if you know what I mean, than if it's just one person. It's still a lot of fun, and a lot of times you get really good stuff. But we're always bringing our stuff with us. We're always seeing it through the veil of our own subconscious. And am I making any sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And the way that I look at it too is, I'm not sure how things come to you or if you get any visions, but for me, the challenge is that, again, sometimes what I see is symbolic. Meaning I have to put a little bit of interpretation or understand what does it mean to me and relate it to that person. Or other times it's literal. I see a red ball and a red ball is relevant to them. But when you compare it with someone else, it kind of gets through all of the less room for error. It gets more to the meat of it because then you can see the true similarities, because then you begin to realize those outlying things, they may be significant, but it could be where you've misinterpreted something or you didn't see it right. Or maybe in your mind you don't have the correct picture symbol for what's being shown to you and you're just not getting it the right way. So I think it's really cool to do it this way and compare techniques because you use what you use and what's comfortable for you and you're familiar with, and then I use mine and we compare what's similar and try to get to what's the meat of it. And maybe the outlying factors are interesting. They might provoke thought. They might, I think the universe makes you say things and do things for a certain reason. I might, go down a different path or inspire a new train of thought. But for the most part, what you have in common with someone else when they use their different technique just kind of gets to the truth of it, gets to, what's not the room for error. It's more the fact of it.
Well, and I also think I'll mention here that I believe you have a little bit of training on things like cards and stuff, and I'm also trained as a trance worker, but I'm not using the trance working skills directly when I'm working with the cards, and I think you're not, you're using visionary mediumship skills when you're doing your readings. So I really do understand a lot of what you're talking about, because when I've done high seat trance, which again I said I don't do on the radio and I don't do for this sort of thing, it's exactly the same thing. You're sitting there and someone asks you a question and these pictures come in your mind, and sometimes they're symbolic and sometimes you don't know what they mean and you're just describing them, which is why I prefer the cards for this sort of personal reading or for this sort of thing, because to me the cards give me a focus, and then it's like I have an intermediary, if that makes any sense, between the information. When I'm in trance, it just comes. It's like a waking dream almost.
Yes, it is exactly like that. It's almost as if you're daydreaming. People always want me to explain how it works, and when I very first started doing it, I would close my eyes, and someone suggested, no, leave your eyes open, and it actually works better when you leave your eyes open and you feel like it's like you almost force yourself into a daydream.
Yeah, I found it interesting. I found it easier to wear a scarf or something over my face, but we can talk about that some other time. Mm-hmm. That's a probably completely different show.
Yeah.
How to do. Actually, what I'd love to do sometime is do a panel with like the woman that actually developed this technique that I learned to use, which was called spay work or spay trance, which is a Norse trance work. And you and maybe 1 or 2 other people. I think that'd be really another fun show. Mm-hmm. Would be to bring some mediums and trance workers together and just let everybody talk. But I think we've gone for nearly an hour now, so I think for tonight that's probably a good place to close. Again, I want to really thank you for coming, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time, and I look forward to being on your show again. So, thank you.
That's all for tonight, folks. See you next time on Cat's Eye on the Future.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a look at what's coming up in your world and your future. Join us again next time for another episode of Cat's Eye on the Future.